Good morning, Rabotai. Welcome to Breakfast in the Class. Breakfast in the Class today is dedicated and sponsored by Laura and Mauricio Sion. Dedicated in celebration of the engagement of their daughter Goldie Sion to Shlomo Abraham. Mazal tov, mazal tov. Maybe you hear only good news for all of Am Yisrael. Also dedicated and sponsored by David Farhi in honor of Hazan Shmuel Levi. Beautiful. Breakfast in Class is dedicated for Bracha and Hatzlacha for the Dania family in Mexico, dedicated by Rosie Gindi. We have some people in Mexico who know exactly who we're talking about. Baruch Hashem. Dedicated in loving memory of Jack Apta, Lilu Nishmat Yaakov ben Rachel, sponsored by his son Meir Apta. In loving memory of Ms. Lily Safa Nishmat Leah Bat Chana. Her philanthropy reaches so many throughout the entire world. And for the speedy and complete for Ashlema, for Eliyahu Shimon ben Mazal Fortune, and for Rabbanit Farhi Chana Bat Simafega. Finally, the week of Kobu was sponsored by David Yash in honor of you and your substantial capacity to go today and every day. Rabotai, the pasuk says, "Adam ki yakriv mikem korban lamonai." As I said yesterday, I should know the parasha. This is my bar mitzvah parasha. In fact, my Hebrew birthday, Kafchet Adar Aleph, or just Adar in a year where there's no leap year, is actually tomorrow. So it's a big tomorrow. Calm down. No need to crack him out early. Tomorrow morning, it'll be the birthday. And yours also. Well, Adar Aleph?
It was one out there.
Oh, there was one Adar there.
Mine too.
Okay. Okay. So my friends, Be'ezrat Hashem, tomorrow we'll do a nice bracha. On the day of a birthday, a person has a koch to give brachot. So inshallah, tomorrow we'll do a nice bracha, the breakfast in the class. So if you want to sponsor that one, then you get a bracha along with it. Okay. The pasuk says, Adam ki yakriv mikem. Korban lamonai. A person brings a korban, ki yakriv korban lamonai. This idea of hakravat korban, our rabbis tell us, is the concept. The word korban comes from the root of the word karov, which means to come close. So karvan or korban is something that brings a person closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now today, we do not have korbanot, okay? Unfortunately. We do not have the Beit HaMikdash, we do not have the ability to bring korbanot, but as the Gemara says, tefilot keneged korbanot tekenu. We instituted the tefillot, the prayers that we say, in the place of the korbanot that we once had. So shaharit and mincha are instituted in lieu of the korban tamid of the morning and the korban tamid of the afternoon. Arbit is instituted in instead of the hakravat imurin that they would burn in the nighttime. So you have here three opportunities, three korbanot. That's why we read the parasha of Tamid in the beginning by korbanot, and then again in the afternoon we read it as well by minha to signify that this tefillah is instead of that korban. So the idea, my friends, I think is something which is really powerful, and I'd like to share it in the guise and through the lens of the korban itself, but also through the lens of our tefillot. Let's start with the origin source, the actual korban itself. What would happen when they would do the korban tamid? Our rabbis tell us that the placement, the korban tamid, these korbanot, they were the korbanot of the tzibur. And the Gemara tells us in Masechet Ta'anit that the korbanot, everyone that had a korban that had to be brought, who would put their hands on the korban? The person whose korban that is. So as an example, they would say a tefillah, they would do what's called smicha, they would lean on the animal with their hands on the animal, and they would say a prayer to God, and they'd say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, anything that I deserve, that I have to do, that I have to fix, let this korban be instead of that happening in my life. So the Gemara says, how does that play out when this korban belongs to all the Jewish people? And the Gemara answers that there was a sophisticated system of the Ma'amadot where the Kohanim would take turns throughout the year. The Leviim also would take turns throughout the year. But what most people don't know is that not only would the Kohanim and the Leviim take turns, but even the Israelim, even the regular Israelites, they would take turns throughout the year. There would be a group of people from Bnei Israel, not from Kohanim, not from Leviim, that would go up to Yerushalayim. And even from those that could not go up to Yerushalayim, they took time off from their work schedule, and they would have a Kriyat Torah, they would have a separate reading, they would be fasting, all different things that they were doing. And what is a central part of that point? That there would be an eclectic mix of Kohen, Levi, and Yisrael present when the korbanot of the tzibur were being brought, so that the person who was being brought on its behalf is present at the time. My friends, I want to learn a lesson. You see that we went to great pains, disrupting the schedule of the Kohanim, of the Leviim, of the Israelim, to be in Yerushalayim, or if they're not in Yerushalayim, to be in the Beit Knesset, doing special readings every day, a different reading from Bereshit, etc., etc. Gemara Ta'anit, you could see it for yourself. Why? Because there's no such thing as a korban if you are not present. My friends, today we have a tefillah instead of the korbanot. There's no such thing as a tefillah if you are not present. And that sounds like an impossibility. To be there for the korban, you had to be there for the korban. To come to shul, how can there be a tefillah without me present? You know what the answer is? If you ever drifted off in your amidah, if you're thinking about your work, if you're thinking about where you're going next, if you're thinking about who's going to order the cab, oh, as Mark is saying, when you think of when you're going to order the cab, when you think of, oh my gosh, I forgot to call the guy for the meeting after the prayers, any thoughts a person has that takes him away from the tefillah is a moment where the person is not present with their own tefillah. Now, my friends, I want you to imagine for 1 second. Your tefillah has many different things inside of it. One thing is health. Another thing is wealth, parnasah. Another thing is in the amidah is the brains, the ability to come up with creative, good ideas. Another thing is the ability to study Torah, to learn lessons. Another thing is having a great leader, a great boss, etc., etc. Could you imagine for that moment you're spacing out, you're not paying attention, you're not present. The korban needs you to be present. Adam ki yakriv mikem korban lamunai. When you bring from yourself a korban to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. My friends, our rabbis tell us that when a person brought a korban, what were they supposed to think? They were supposed to think in their mind that, you know what, all this is happening to this animal really was supposed to happen to me. The animal is going through shechita, the animal is being brought on the mizbeach. The animal did nothing wrong. I was the one that messed up. I'm the one that needs kapara. Hazit the animal. But you know what? I'm seeing this blood on the mizbeach as if it's mine, because you know what? I need a kapara. My friends, if a person is not in that state of mind, then what'd you do? The whole korban didn't achieve it. Adam ki yakriv mikem. It has to come from you. Now the korban that you bring is going to be min hakevasim, right? It could be from the sheep, it could be from the ayil, it could be from a par, it could be from many different species. But unless you're putting yourself in that korban, what happens? Nada. It's not there. The second lesson, my friends, is that a person needs to put themselves into the tefillot. Let me explain what that means. You say atachonin la'adam da'at, but you're not thinking of anything. You're just reading the words blind, dry. What did you do? You read the words of the tefillah, but you didn't put yourself into the tefillah. You didn't think to Hashem. You didn't say in that berakah, Hashem, I'm having trouble working out how to deal with my son. I'm having trouble working out what to do, where to invest this money. I'm having trouble figuring out how I'm going to shift my investment. I have to pay crazy amount of taxes here. How am I going to do this where it's legal, where it's ethical, but at the same time, I don't get killed? That's what atachonen la'adam da'at looks like. When it's adam ki yakriv mikem. You brought yourself close enough into the tefillah, not just that you're present and not there, but also that you exist and that you appear in the bakasha itself. There was a rabbi that once came to his rav and he said, I'm a Rebbe in a school, I have to teach over a Gemara class. The rabbi said to him, please, Rabbi, only answer amen if you're here or listening to this live. His rabbi said to him, he says, okay, what's the problem? He says, you know what? It's hard coming up all the time with chidushim. What should I do? Where should I pray for chidushim? It's a tough job. If I don't say chidushim, I'm not going to keep the job. The rabbi told him he should pray that he should come up with chidushe Torah in Barachenu. Because Barachenu is the beracha for parnasah. You're coming, now I always thought to myself, I heard the story, I said, what? That's a shocker. You're telling a guy to pray for chidushe Torah in Barachenu? Tell him to pray for chidushe Torah in not Shema Kolenu. Shema Kolenu is catch-all. Tachonin la'adam da'at. Or Hashivenu Avinu L'Toratecha. You're telling the guy to come up with chidushim in his parnasah bracha? That's how you relate to it? Hashem, please let me give good classes, otherwise they're going to fire me in the shul. That's why you want to teach Torah, so you keep your job? Sorry? Excellent. The guy came to the rabbi, and what did he ask him? He said, I need to come up with chidushim for my job. He says, if that's how you're thinking about this, pray for it in parnasah. You know why? Because where you praying for it from the place where you're worried about it. If you're a Talmid Chacham and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't figure out what to do. I remember I said a story when I spoke at the Agudah convention about Rav Chaim. Someone once came to the Rabbanit, and they said to the Rabbanit, you really need to look out for the rabbi. Look, he looks terrible. He's disheveled, he looks miserable, he's, do something. I don't know, make him his favorite banana cake. I don't know. All right? She says, he looks terrible. She said, come up with the answer to the stira, to the contradiction that he had in the Rambam, in Hilchot Me'ila, and it won't be miserable. What was he miserable about? In his world, if he had a problem in learning that he couldn't work out, that made him tear his hair out. So for someone like him, where's he really praying for that answer? He's praying for that answer in the Berachot, which talk about Torah, which talk about wisdom. If you know what, if you have to come up with the answer, because otherwise you're not going to get a job, you're not going to get hired as a speaker, then you should be praying for it from Barachenu. My friends, the one thing I want to ask for is, like the Pasuk says, Karov Adonai l'chol korav, Hashem is close to everyone. L'chol asher yikra'uhu be'emet. If you're calling out in truth. If you're saying that you want something, but you could not care less about it. Avinu Avarachaman, please Hashem, bring us closer to Torah, right? L'shmor v'la'asod, kayeh. Please Hashem, help me understand the word. This is what we say in the Beracha before Shema. But imagine a guy who prays and then goes to work. He doesn't spend any time learning. So you prayed. You even sang, Shelo Nevo. You sang it, beautiful. But then you didn't sit down and learn anything. You didn't open a book. You didn't listen to a class. How do you want that Torah to come? So you know what? I'd rather you pray for that in the Beracha of Barachenu and mean it than pray for it in the Beracha of Atah Chonen or Hashivenu Avinu Toratecha and not mean it. Because Karov Hashem Chol Korav Chol Sheikru Be'emet. You want to be able to use prayer, which is instituted instead of Korbanot. Adam ki yakriv mikem Korban Lamonai. Where are you in the Amidah? You're praying for Parnasah? Pray to Hashem. Ask Him. Talk about the problem you have in the office. Stop. You know where you stop in every Berakah? People don't know this. They put their prayer in. Hashem, please, I have the biggest deal of my life. Please help me out. Hashem, I have money in Silicon Valley. Hashem, please help me out. Right? I don't know if that's Tfilat Shav. Either way, tell me. Right? You're sitting there, you're making a prayer, and then Baruch Atah Hashem. You're supposed to insert the prayer, not before the bracha, but before the line, before the bracha. So let's say a person's praying for Rifuah Shlema. Where should they institute the prayer? Not, but Hashem, please heal them. Baruch Atah Hashem. Or Rofech. No, not there. But before the pasuk, before Ki El Rofeh Hamam Ne'eman Ata, that's where you say it. Because every bracha needs what's called a siyum, a closing, before it says the bracha itself. So that's where you insert any one of your prayers. So that's what it means. My friends, I want to tell you an unbelievable story about this idea. There was a guy, the Ben Ish Chai tells a story. There's this guy in the community, very wealthy guy. The guy he knew less than nothing. Nothing. The guy is Am Haaretz, Mideoraita, Midrabanan. Okay? He didn't know any Torah, he didn't know any halachot. Simpleton, he didn't know, but his heart's in the right place. He doesn't know how to read Hebrew. Comes to shul, he sits there. But what he enjoyed when the Chazan would sing, he enjoyed. Anyway, he was in a synagogue. It had to be a Moroccan synagogue, by the way. No chance that this story was about anything other than Moroccans. Yigal, you'll tell me if I'm right. How do I know? You'll tell me how I know this story of Ben Ish Chai is about the Moroccans. This Chazan used to sing very beautifully the words in the Korbanot. Elu va'elu nisrafin bebet hadeshen. He sang it very beautifully. He had a nice tune for these words. Elu va'elu nisrafin bebet hadeshen. Anyway, the guy would come to shul all the time. The Chazan is singing. He's sitting there like this. Why? Elu va'elu. It's his favorite part of the tefillah. Elu va'elu nisrafin bebet hadeshen. How do I know it's a Moroccan shul? Because the only one that's singing in the korbanot is Moroccans. Everyone else is flying through the korbanot. The Moroccans sing every word of the tefillah like it's a diamond. Moroccans' regular tefillah is the length of everyone else's Rosh Hashanah tefillah. Beautiful, okay? Anyway, my friends, so he comes home, he has this beautiful tefillah, he doesn't speak Hebrew. Friday night, he calls the kids up. That guy has 10 boys and 5 girls. And he only knows a few limited things. But he loves his prayer so much. He tells all of his kids, guys, from now on, Friday night, instead of saying, Yivarecha Hashem v'yishmerecha, Hashem should protect you, I have a new prayer I want to say to bless every one of my children. He brings his firstborn, Elu va'elu, nisrafim bet hadeshet. Everyone, he's putting his hands on the kids. This one, what does it mean in Hebrew? This one and this one should be burned on the Mizbeach. Should be burned in the Beit HaDeshen. Anyway, all the kids, wow, what a beautiful bracha. Thank you, Abba, kissing his hand. Wow, his wife thinks, wow, look at, he's growing, my beautiful chacham of husband. A little while later, this beautiful, simple Jew invites a rabbi over for Friday night dinner. The rabbi comes, the guy makes kiddush, he asks the rabbi to make kiddush because he can't read. The rabbi makes the kiddush. Now comes time to give the bracha. The guy is a little bit proud. He calls all of his kids one at a time. Elu va'elu. The rabbi is looking, shu elu va'elu. Nisrafim bet hadeshen. The rabbi starts screaming. Maniac, we're crazy. What's wrong with you? He says, what's the matter? He says, you know what? You're cursing your children. Why would you do that to your kids? This one and this one should be burned in the bet hadeshen. That's how you call your kids? The guy feels terrible. He feels so bad. He feels that, especially in front of all of his children, he's now been embarrassed. That night, the rabbi had a dream. And in the dream, they told him in Hashamayim that he did a terrible sin. Because although this person was blessing with the wrong words, it was the part of tefillah that he connected with the most from the Chazan. He brought that home. He wanted to bring that he loved from the Beit Knesset into his house. So what he felt and what he experienced in the Beit Knesset, that's what he was giving to his kids. And you don't know in Shamayim what a rash that made. And now you took that away. And he's never going to do it ever again. If you would only know the shefa that's brought down, the beracha that was brought down by this man's elu va'elu nisrafin b'beit hadeshen. And I was thinking to myself, what does it mean? Elu va'elu nisrafin b'beit hadeshen. What does that mean? This one and this one are burned in the place where they burned the parts of the korbanot. How could that turn into a beracha? And I was reminded of the words that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says about Bil'am. Ve'yafoch Amonai, and Hashem your God turned et ha'kilala leberacha into a beracha. Why? Ki ahevecha Hashem elokecha, because Hashem loves you. When you love someone, when someone loves you, even the worst situation, the biggest kilala, can be turned around into a beracha. You know, I want to remind you that when the Jewish people left Egypt, Paro says to them, listen, you want to go, no problem. But re'u, ki ra'a neged penechem. You should just know, you're gonna encounter some really terrible things. The Gemara tells us, what does Paro mean when he said to Moshe, you want to take the Jews out? No problem. Re'u, you should see, ra'a neged penechem. What does that mean? The Gemara tells us that Paro saw b'istagninut shelo. He was able to see in the stars. He understood that the Jewish people going into the desert, they were going to go out under the mazal of Ma'adim, which is red. And he knew that would be a sign of blood. And he said, you're walking into a bloodshed. Don't take your people out. But what did God do? God gave them the mitzvot of Dam Pesach and Dam Milah. Like we say in the Haggadah, Va'omar lach b'damayich chayi. Va'omar lach b'damayich chayi. Ve'erech, and I saw you, says Hashem, mitboseset b'damayich. You're wallowing in your blood, in the blood that was supposed to be the end of the Jewish people, under the mazal of Ma'adim. They had a destiny that was leading them to a terrible place because they didn't actually deserve to leave Egypt because they didn't have the mitzvot. But what did God do? V'yafech Hashem and God turned, v'yafoch, et ha'kelala libracha, ki ahevecha Hashem Elokecha. When there's love, ha'ahava mikalkelet et hashura, a line where something is supposed to lead, you turn it around. I'll never forget, I had a family member that unfortunately had to go for a surgery. Anyway, they went for the surgery, and what happens when they went for the surgery? The doctors were able to discover that there was a problem underneath that surgery. That was a dire problem that if they didn't need this surgery, they never would have found the problem at all. So a person sitting there thinking, why, Hashem, how can you making this happen to me? But God, He loves you. And the thing that you think is a kilala is actually in the hands of Borei Olam, that's a beracha. And the only thing that we need to be able to have that beracha come down is the loving connection between us and God. Now, as far as God is concerned, it's always there. The only question is whether or not we're there. Are we present? Are we in our tefillot? Tefillah is a connection with God. That's what it's supposed to be, a relationship with Him. If you're dialing it in, if you're not there, if you're not present in your thoughts and your mouth, if you're not in the tefillah, your own personal stories are not interwoven in the pages of your siddur, then you're not there. And how could you have a loving relationship with someone if you're not there? The number one thing that you need in a relationship is not presence with a T, it's presence with a C. You need to show up. And that's what it means, Adam ki akriv mikem. So I thought to myself, how did God turn Elu va'elu nisrafim bet adeshen? How could such a thing? How could that become a beracha? Someone is blessing his children. This one and this one should be burned. And I thought to myself, I remembered, the Navi tells us that he saw in his prophecy the Kohen Gadol, and his clothing was burned. Which Kohen Gadol? Yoshua, right? That's what it says. He saw the Kohen Gadol, and his clothing was burned. And what did he say that he looked at? He looked like he was Ud Mutzal Me'esh. That he had on either side of him, Yigar Hashem B'cha Satan. Hashem looks at the Satan. He looks at the Malach HaMavet. He looks at the Yetzer Hara that surround us. And what did he do for all the negative kochot that come with a person when they deserve to be punished? When they haven't merited zechut. When maybe they now need to be taught a lesson. Elu va'elu yisrefu bebet hadeshen. Hashem allowed for those words to become in the mouth of someone who said them with such regesh, such connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He allowed it to become a beracha. My friends, the flip side is also true. You're treating HaKadosh Baruch Hu like a candy machine. You put in 20 cents into the tzedakah box, then you pull the thing and he gives you a chocolate bar. That's your relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Bar Minan, the opposite could also happen. The berachot that we want could manifest maybe in ways that we didn't want. You could pray hard enough for a shidduch that's not good for you. Because you didn't bring Hashem into the story at all. It was all about me, 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 me. So korban, which a tefillah is instead of, you know when it works? Adam ki akriv mikem. Korban, that korban, where is that closeness? Is lamonai. That closeness is not to yourself. It's not to your needs. It's a connection to a loving Father. And yes, that loving Father wants all the best for you. But you know what the difference is? We have children here in this room. Maybe if you don't have children, you don't quite understand this. Your kid comes, please, 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 can we get, you take out the money. Imagine they grab the money and run. When you come to the Bet HaKnesset, don't grab the money and run. If Hashem says not yet, don't say, oof, I prayed, what's the point? Imagine saying that to your father to his face. Why did I even bother coming? What, the only reason why you're here is if I say yes? Our relationship is so dependent and conditional that if you don't feel the prayer is working for you right now, right this second, you're going to swap me out? What am I, task rabbit? You know, I'm going to get someone else. Someone else will work for me. Adam ki akriv mikem. Hashem should bless us always to be able to feel that closeness, and through that closeness to experience beracha and not to demand it. Baruch Adonai le'olam.